You don't even know business, the CEO snapped, his grin sharp and confident. Laughter rippled through the boardroom. Suits leaned back, coffee cups clinked, and for a moment, cruelty passed as comedy. The janitor stood near the door, mop in hand, quiet as dust. He hadn't meant to speak. It was a whisper, really. A soft comment about the company's waste costs. But the CEO heard it, and now it was open season. Maybe you should stick to cleaning floors, the CEO said, smirking wider. That's the kind of profit you understand. The laughter rose again. Someone clapped. Someone else avoided eye contact. The janitor didn't move. His face stayed still, unreadable, like he'd already lived through worse than this room could offer. His eyes traveled to the numbers on the whiteboard, neat columns of projections, and then back to the man in charge. He let the noise fade before speaking. Funny thing about floors, he said quietly, they show who's been walking over everyone and who's really carrying the dirt. The air thinned. The laughter died before anyone decided why. The CEO blinked, searching for a comeback that didn't sound small. The janitor waited a heartbeat, then turned, placed his mop back in the bit, and walked out. No one stopped him. No one even breathed loud enough to break the silence. Somewhere between the door closing and the CEO clearing his throat, the entire room began to wonder what exactly they'd just witnessed, and who that man really was. From where are you watching around the world? Let me know in the comments below. The morning after the meeting began like every other. The janitor arrived before sunrise, unlocking side doors no one else used, humming a tune that never had words. His name was David Reyes, though hardly anyone at the company knew it. To most, he was just the man who appeared after hours, the figure you stepped around without noticing. He cleaned the fingerprints off glass doors, emptied bins that overflowed with half-eaten lunches, and fixed coffee machines no one bothered to thank him for. There was a rhythm to it: rinse, wipe, move on. The kind of order that made chaos bearable. But beneath that quiet routine lived another life. Years ago, David had worn a different uniform: pressed shirts, clean shoes, a company badge with founder under his name. He'd built a small logistics startup from his garage, hiring neighbors, mentoring interns, designing systems that cut waste by half. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, the kind that made him proud to shake hands with anyone, from clients to janitors. Then came the merger. A larger corporation, this one, offered to partner with him. The meetings were polite at first, full of smiles and promises of growth. They talked about shared vision, synergy, and long-term value. He signed the papers, believing their words meant partnership. Within 6 months, they gutted his operations, absorbed his patents, and pushed him out under a non-compete clause he barely understood. By the time the lawsuits ended, his savings were gone, his company name erased, and his reputation twisted into failure. He wasn't just beaten, he was humiliated. When bills came, he took the only job available that wouldn't violate his non-compete: janitorial maintenance, ironically in the same building where his former investors now sat. At first he told himself it was temporary, just a few months to recover. But months turned to years. What started as survival became quiet acceptance. He stopped looking at the executives' faces, stopped expecting apologies. Instead, he found peace in smaller acts: a polished floor, a fixed light, a hallway that smelled like clean beginnings. Some nights, though, when the building emptied and the silence grew heavy, he'd pause outside the glass meeting room, the one where the CEO and his team now planned the future. He'd look through the reflection, not at them but at himself, a man unseen, yet still standing. The betrayal had taught him something wealth never could. Dignity doesn't vanish when titles do. It only disappears when you start believing you're less than the people who wronged you. He refused to let that happen. So he worked quietly, listened carefully, and every now and then, he couldn't help but offer a suggestion under his breath. Small ideas to fix waste, to save costs, to make things better. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same principles that once built a company were now keeping its floors spotless. But he didn't speak to be noticed. He spoke because truth was habit, and habits are hard to kill. That's what made yesterday's moment sting less than it should have. He'd been laughed at before. He'd lost more than mockery could take. What unsettled him wasn't the insult. It was the echo of his past self, standing at another table, once proud, once hurt. As he wrung out the mop that morning, the sunlight caught the worn badge clipped to his belt. Facilities staff. He stared at it for a long second, then clipped it back with quiet precision. He no longer needed people to know who he was. But somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn voice whispered, they would one day. The announcement came 3 days after the meeting, a corporate-wide email sent with the kind of enthusiasm that smelled like performance. Innovate 360, every voice matters. The subject line glittered in blue font, followed by paragraphs about inclusivity, creativity, and breaking silos. The CEO's face filled the attached video. He spoke with rehearsed warmth, the kind of tone that softened words like contest into opportunity. "This is your chance," he said, "to make your voice heard. We're inviting all employees, from interns to executives, everyone to share an idea that could help this company grow." Applause followed in the recording. Then came the part no one missed. A smirk just before he added, "Even the janitors if they've got a billion-dollar idea." In the break room, laughter rolled again. But this time it wasn't cruel, just careless. The kind of humor that hides behind "we didn't mean it that way." David heard it while mopping the hallway outside. He didn't flinch. He'd learned to let noise pass through him like air. But when the department manager walked by and joked, "Hey Reyes, you got any genius ideas up your sleeve?" the laughter carried further than usual. He looked up slowly, eyes calm as always. "Maybe one," he said. The room quieted, unsure if he was serious. Someone snickered. "Sure you do, man. You'll win the CEO's heart with that mop design." David smiled faintly. Maybe not the heart, but maybe the numbers. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't pride. It was the kind of answer that left no target for mockery. Just a question nobody wanted to ask out loud. What if he wasn't joking? That afternoon, a young intern named Maya from accounting, the same one who'd laughed, opened the submission portal on her screen. She hesitated, then typed, "Employee name David Ray, Department Facilities. Idea title Resource Optimization Model." She hit submit with a grin. "Let's see what happens," she whispered, half amusement, half curiosity. By the next morning the company email thread was alive. The janitor entered the innovation challenge. Screenshots circulated, jokes followed, and by lunchtime even the CEO had heard. During his next executive briefing, the CEO brought it up casually. "Our facilities guy wants to save the company," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Let's make sure he gets a fair shot, front row seat at the showcase." The room laughed, as expected, but one of the senior directors, an older man named Patel, didn't. He glanced down at his notes and muttered, "Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you." The CEO ignored it. "Trust me," he said, "this'll be good for morale. They'll see we're really inclusive." Imagine the headlines. "CEO gives janitor a voice." That was the thing about corporate kindness. It always came with a camera angle. David received his confirmation email that evening. He read it once, twice, then printed it and folded it neatly into his pocket. He didn't tell anyone. He just kept working, the same way he always did, methodical, silent, precise. But inside, something old flickered awake. A forgotten rhythm. Late nights at his old startup, writing algorithms on whiteboards, explaining efficiency models to teams who believed in him. He wasn't doing this for revenge. He was doing it because truth, when silence too long, starts to itch beneath the skin. That night after finishing his shift, he sat in the maintenance office surrounded by spare bulbs and cleaning supplies. He took out a notebook, not a laptop, just paper and pen, and began sketching flow diagrams, resource streams, waste metrics, routing systems. His handwriting was steady, the kind of calm precision born from years of repetition. Each line represented more than math. It was a memory of what he'd once built and what had been stolen. When the security guard came in for rounds, he asked, "Working overtime again, Dave?" David smiled. "Just trying to make something clean." Over the next few days, word spread that the janitor project was actually taking shape. Some laughed harder. Others started to wonder what he was really up to. Maya, the intern who'd entered his name, found herself stopping by his workspace now and then, pretending to refill her coffee. "So," she asked, "what are you actually building?" He looked up from his notebook. "Something simple. Just fixing leaks." "In the pipes?" she asked. He smiled. "In the system." There was something about the way he said it, not defiant, not proud, that made her leave thoughtful instead of amused. By the time the submission deadline arrived, David had turned in a 3-page handwritten concept. No fancy slides, no buzzwords, just a model predicting cost reductions through better resource cycles. The same design his old company once pitched before being devoured by this one. When the review panel met, the CEO leafed through the pages and laughed. "He thinks he's discovered recycling," he said. "Fine. Let's feature him in round 1. A good opening act before the real presentations." The PR team nodded eagerly. a janitor presenting an idea. It was too good for optics to pass up. In the hallways, whispers followed him now. Some mocking, some curious. The facility's crew, his people, cheered him on quietly. One of them patted his shoulder saying, "Show him what brains look like without suits." David just smiled. "Brains aren't the point," he said. "Clean thinking is." That night as he locked the mop room and looked out over the gleaming floors, he felt something shift. Not pride, purpose. For years he'd scrubbed the evidence of other people's carelessness. Maybe it was time to clean the system itself. He didn't plan to win their approval. He only planned to speak once, clearly, and let truth do what truth always does, outlast arrogance. And when he walked into that conference room again, holding nothing but a folder and the same quiet dignity they once mocked, some would laugh again. But this time they wouldn't be laughing for long. "Next up, David Reyes," the coordinator announced, her tone half curious, half nervous. The auditorium lights dimmed slightly. Employees filled every seat. This was the company's big innovation showcase. Cameras rolled, not for history, for publicity. The CEO sat in the front row, legs crossed, fingers tapping the armrest, like a man waiting to be entertained. David stepped onto the stage holding a single folder and a small handmade model, cardboard, tape, and markers. No slides, no animation, no buzzwords. Just him. The crowd whispered. A few phones were already out to record the moment. He placed the model on the podium and began calmly. "This is a resource flow model," he said. "It's built to cut waste by tracking how every material, every shipment, and every handoff moves through the company." His voice was measured, grounded. He spoke like a man explaining something simple, not selling something clever. "I used this method years ago for a logistics firm about this size. We reduced operational loss by 42% within the first quarter. The math hasn't changed, only the people using it have." A murmur ran through the room. It wasn't excitement, it was disbelief. The CEO leaned forward, smiling just enough to show teeth. "So," he interrupted, "you're saying you can teach us how to run a supply chain? That's adorable." Laughter burst from the audience, some forced, some eager. David didn't flinch. "Not teach," he replied. "Remind. Systems fall apart when people forget simple principles." "Oh?" The CEO rose slightly, pacing in front of the audience. "And what's your simple principle, Mr. Reyes?" David met his eyes. "Respect what you use, whether it's material, money, or people." For a moment, there was quiet. Then the CEO laughed again, louder this time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning to the audience, "we have a man teaching fish to swim. Our janitor thinks he's discovered efficiency." More laughter. Cameras clicked. David looked at the crowd, hundreds of faces trying not to stare directly at him. He didn't see cruelty, not really. He saw fear, the kind that keeps people laughing when they know something isn't funny. He closed his folder gently. "I didn't come to teach," he said. "I came to show how things get cleaner when waste isn't rewarded." The CEO clapped mockingly. "Cleaner. I'll give you that, Reyes. You've done a great job at that already." The laughter returned, sharper now, echoing off the walls. David stood still for one last moment. Then he placed the folder and the cardboard model on the table beside him. Neatly, almost reverently, without another word, he stepped away from the microphone, walked down the thess, and headed toward the exit. The laughter stumbled as he reached the door. Even those who wanted to keep joking couldn't find the courage. There was something in the way he walked, straight, silent, unhurried, that made mockery sound cheap. The CEO called after him. "No hard feelings, Reyes. I'll keep the model for the janitorial archives." David didn't turn around. The door closed softly behind him, and the sound carried further than any applause could have. Inside the room, the laughter finally died. The interns looked at one another. The managers shuffled papers that didn't need shuffling. The CEO returned to his seat, muttering, "What's wrong with everyone?" It was a joke. But even he felt the shift, a hollow aftertaste in victory. Back in the corridor, David walked toward the service elevator. He could still hear faint laughter echoing from behind the doors, but it didn't sting anymore. The humiliation wasn't new. The difference now was how little it owned him. He pressed the elevator button, hands steady. The small prototype still sat on the stage behind him, forgotten by everyone except one person, Maya, the intern, who couldn't stop staring at it. She didn't know why yet, but something about the way it was built, the simplicity, the precision, made her believe he hadn't just walked out in defeat. He'd left something behind on purpose. By the next morning, David's name had become office currency. Someone had uploaded a clip of the presentation. The moment the CEO said, "A man teaching fish to swim." The video hit the internal company forum before noon. Memes followed, photos of mops next to graphs, jokes about janitorial economics, even a gif of the CEO pretending to bow to a mop handle. People laughed, reposted, tagged each other. It wasn't malicious to everyone, just easy. Mocking what's harmless always feels safe. But the man at the center of it all didn't say a word. David went on with his shift like nothing had happened. He replaced light bulbs, fixed a leaking valve in the break room, restocked paper towels in the same bathrooms where people whispered his name behind half-closed doors. Every now and then someone tried to be kind. "Hey Reyes, don't let him get to you. It's just jokes." He'd smile softly. "If laughter keeps the floor clean, I'll take it." That was all he ever said. He never looked bitter, never defensive. He carried himself with the same quiet steadiness that had kept him alive through worse storms. Meanwhile, on the 12th floor, the forgotten prototype sat on a corner desk in the operations department. It had been picked up after the event by Maya, the intern. She couldn't get the design out of her head, the way it mapped every process in loops instead of straight lines, showing how small wastes multiplied when ignored. She decided to test it. Using internal logistics data, numbers she could access for her internship project, she entered them into the simple formulas he'd drawn. The results startled her. The model wasn't naive or symbolic. It worked. It predicted bottlenecks the company's expensive software missed. It showed inefficiencies in shipment routing that could save the firm millions every quarter. Maya ran it twice, then 3 times. Same result. She printed the data and brought it to her supervisor, a mid-level manager named Patel, the same man who had stayed silent during the CEO's mockery. "Sir," she said carefully, "I think this thing might actually be valuable." Patel frowned. "You mean the janitor's paper model?" "Yes," she said. "I think he's onto something." He scanned the sheet, eyebrows tightening. The math wasn't amateur work. It was sophisticated, simplified, but elegant. The kind of efficiency mapping used by consultants who charged 6 figures. "Who helped him?" Patel asked. "No one," she said. "He drew it himself." Patel leaned back thinking, "Don't talk about this to anyone yet," he said. "Let me check something."
That night, after the building emptied,
Patel stayed behind. He accessed archived vendor files, old merger documents, acquisition records. It took hours, but eventually he found it. Reyes Logistics Solutions, a small firm absorbed by their company 5 years earlier. The founder's name, David Reyes. Patel sat there for a long time. The silence in the office felt heavier than usual. Meanwhile, downstairs, David was wiping the marble in the lobby. The reflection in the floor showed a man who looked tired but not broken. His movements were slow, methodical. To anyone watching, it looked like routine, but to him every motion was an act of reclaiming control. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. The world had already taken its turn. This quiet dignity was his rebellion. He stopped when Maya approached him later that night. She held a file in her hands. "Mr. Reyes," she said softly, "I think your model works." He looked up, curious but calm. "You tested it?" "Yes, it predicts shipment losses before they happen." "It's incredible." He gave a small nod, wiping his hands on a cloth. "That's good," he said. "Then it's doing what it was built for." "You should show them," she insisted. "They need to see this." He smiled, not bitterly, but kindly. "They already did. They just weren't ready to understand." She frowned. "But you could—" "I could fight," he interrupted gently. "But fighting dirt doesn't always clean it. Sometimes you just let time do the sweeping." The words didn't sound like surrender. They sounded like peace. When she left, he folded her printouts and tucked them into his pocket. Just in case, not as evidence, as memory. Proof that something honest could still work in a dishonest place. Over the following week, whispers began to shift. A few analysts noticed the test data Patel had quietly circulated. "You know," one said in the cafeteria, "that janitor might actually have had something." No one said it too loud. No one tagged it in the group chats. But the laughter started to fade. David noticed. He didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. He just kept mopping, humming the same wordless tune, the sound of a man who didn't need to be right to be free. And somewhere above him, behind office glass and layers of pride, a few people began to wonder whether humility had just walked out of that boardroom with more power than anyone inside it. Patel found Maya early the next morning. She was at her desk, reviewing data she'd stayed late to verify. The exhaustion in her eyes couldn't hide the excitement beneath it. He closed the door behind him and placed a folder on her desk. "You were right," he said quietly. "The numbers check out, every single one." Her eyes widened. "You mean—" "Yes," he interrupted. "If we implemented this model even on a small scale, it could save at least 6 million a quarter, maybe more." He exhaled, rubbing his temple. "I ran the numbers twice myself. It's clean, efficient, elegant. Whoever built it knew logistics better than half our operations department." Maya hesitated, lowering her voice. "Sir, you know who built it?" Patel nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's the problem." He leaned on her desk. "You said he used to own a company, right? I didn't know that until you told me." He sighed. "Well, he did. The company this one swallowed up years ago. Most of the people who worked with him are long gone. They either quit or were pushed out." "So, he's been here all this time?" she asked. "Maintenance, yes, not by choice." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Then Patel said, "I want to talk to him." Quietly. No emails, no memos. Just, see what he wants done with this. Maya nodded. "I'll take you to him." That afternoon they found David in the supply corridor, replacing a ceiling filter. His back was turned when Patel called out softly, "Mr. Rhea." David turned, surprised to hear his full name. "You remember me?" Patel asked. David gave a polite nod. "I remember faces, not titles." Patel smiled faintly. "Good habit." He held up the folder. "We tested your model." David didn't react. Not right away. He just studied their expressions like someone reading weather before deciding whether to step outside. "And?" he asked. "It works," Patel said. "Better than anything our team's developed in years." David went back to tightening the filter screw. "Then use it." Maya stepped forward. "Sir, I think what he means is—" "I know what he means," David interrupted gently. "He wants to know if I'll help them fix what's broken." He climbed down from the ladder, wiping dust from his hands. "But that's not my world anymore." Patel exchanged a glance with Maya. "I understand," he said carefully, "but it could help a lot of people, save jobs, secure budgets. I'm not asking for your comeback, I'm asking for your guidance." David looked at him, expression soft but tired. "Guidance?" "Yes. We can't replicate some parts of the design. You have notes, patterns, ratios, logic we can't reverse engineer. You don't have to do this for credit. Do it for the system." He didn't speak for a long time. His eyes wandered to the hallway window, where sunlight reflected off the polished floor he'd just cleaned. Finally he said, "For the company's sake, not for mine. That's the only reason I'll share what I have." Maya smiled, relieved. Patel nodded in quiet respect. That night, David opened an old metal drawer in the maintenance office. Beneath rags and spare gloves lay a worn notebook, the same one he'd kept since his startup days. He flipped through pages covered in equations, notes, and diagrams, ghosts of the man he used to be. He didn't plan to hand it all over, only what would help them make the system better. The rest, the heart of his work, would stay with him. Some truths needed stewardship, not ownership. The next morning, he met Patel and Maya in a small break room away from the executive floors. He handed over copies of a few pages. "These will fix your routing loop errors," he said. "You're losing efficiency because your transfer intervals don't account for idle load time." Maya scanned the pages, stunned. "How do you even see that without software?" David shrugged lightly. "Experience teaches you to listen to patterns before they go silent." Patel folded the papers carefully. "You're helping us more than you know." "I'm just returning something that belonged to honesty," David said. "Not me." From that day forward, the three of them met quietly every few nights after work. Patel brought reports, Maya brought data, and David brought his quiet logic. Together they restructured half the system without anyone knowing. It wasn't rebellion, it was repair. They called it the Bridge Project. Not officially, but among themselves. A bridge between the ignored and the influential, between those who spoke loudest and those who simply understood. As they worked, something subtle began to change in all of them. Patel, once pragmatic and disillusioned, rediscovered the pride of real improvement. Maya stopped chasing approval and started chasing truth. And David, he began to heal. He didn't say it, but they saw it in how he stood a little taller, how his hands trembled less when he spoke, how the old fire behind his calm returned, not to burn but to torm. For the first time in years he was part of something again, and though no one else in the company knew, a quiet alliance had begun, one built not on power but on respect. The office, after dark, had a strange kind of peace. The hum of machines faded, lights dimmed to a sleepy glow, and footsteps echoed like whispers through long empty halls. That was when David liked to work, when noise stopped pretending to be progress. Maya began joining him in those hours, not because Patel told her to, but because something about David's calm drew her in. She would bring her laptop, a few printouts, and a sense of restless purpose she couldn't explain. One night she found him polishing the lobby floor. The reflection gleamed like glass. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked, watching the mop move in steady circles. "Tired of what?" "Doing the same thing every night, cleaning what everyone dirties again the next morning." He smiled faintly. "That's business, isn't it?" She laughed softly. "You mean cleaning?" "I mean cycles," he said. "You can't stop people from creating messes. You just make sure the system knows how to recover." She thought about that while opening her laptop. "That's oddly profound." "It's simple," he said. "Every part has a function. Floors carry weight. Lights reveal work. Pipes move waste away. The moment one stops respecting what the other does, the system breaks." She looked up from her screen. "You talk about buildings like people." He paused, leaning on the mop handle. "Buildings are people in a way. Every job, every title, every corner, they're all connected. When one thinks it's above the other, decay begins." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reflective. She realized that he wasn't just talking about maintenance or logistics. He was talking about life. Their sessions, as Patel later called them, became a rhythm. Every few nights they'd sit together in the break room or storage area, surrounded by the soft hum of vending machines. She'd show him new data and he'd mark up her sheets with a pencil, explaining ratios and metaphors that made sense even without graphs. "You see this line?" he'd say, drawing a circle around a gap. "That's what happens when managers make decisions without listening to the ground staff. Like polishing a floor without checking if it's dry. Looks shiny but people slip." She'd laugh, writing that down word for word. Another time, when her formulas failed, she sighed. "I think I broke the model." He shook his head. "No, you just found its honesty." "What do you mean?" "Good systems fail where humans lie to themselves. It's not a weakness, it's a mirror. You don't fix the system by patching the numbers. You fix the thinking that made them sell." She had never heard anyone talk about business that way, not in her university classes, not in corporate trainings. There was no arrogance in his teaching, just depth, the kind that came from living through losses, reading about them. One evening, while revising data points, she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest for days. "Why did you really say yes to that challenge? You must have known they'd laugh." David didn't answer right away. He wiped his hands with a cloth, staring at the faint lines of callus that mapped his fingers. "Because silence teaches no one," he said finally. "And sometimes, letting people laugh is the only way to remind them what truth sounds like when it doesn't shout." She sat quietly, feeling something tighten in her throat. In those moments she stopped seeing him as the janitor and started seeing him as a mentor. Not a professor with a syllabus, but a man who taught by living proof. Over time, their project evolved. The model became smarter, layered with new data, more predictive, more human. Patel quietly sent pieces of it to test sites, and results came back glowing. Each test saved the company thousands. Yet David never asked for credit. When Patel suggested adding his name to the internal report, he refused. "Give it to the team," he said. "Let the young ones own it. I've already had my name printed on too many things that didn't last." Maya disagreed. "You built this," she said one night, her voice almost trembling. "You deserve recognition." He smiled gently. "Recognition doesn't rebuild people. Doing something honest does." That line stayed with her. She began noticing how differently she approached her own work. She listened more. She stopped cutting corners for convenience. When her peers bragged about promotions and visibility, she felt no envy, only quiet confidence that meaning mattered more than credit. And though David never said it, she knew he was healing too. Each session pulled him further from the shadow of his old downfall. The bitterness that once lingered behind his composure began to fade, replaced by something lighter. Grace. One night, near midnight, she looked up from her screen and said, "You know, this whole thing feels less like fixing numbers and more like cleaning the company's soul." He chuckled softly. "Then let's hope the stain doesn't come back." When she left that night, she paused at the door, watching him polish the last stretch of floor. For the first time, she noticed something symbolic. The reflection on the marble wasn't just light, it was clarity. The kind that spreads slowly, quietly, until the whole place begins to shine. And maybe, she thought, that was what David had been doing all along, teaching the world that real leadership doesn't come from standing above others, but from helping what's beneath you shine again. The first sign of trouble came quietly, an email, CC'd to the entire management chain. Subject to CEO to present new efficiency initiative to the board. Maya stared at the subject line, eyes narrowing. Attached was a slide deck labeled Operation Clean Flow. She clicked through the presentation, and her stomach dropped. Every chart, every metric, every design principle, it was their model, word for word. The janitor's work, rebranded, repackaged, stripped of context. And at the top of every slide, presented by CEO Daniel Kerrigan. She felt her pulse in her ears. She called Patel immediately. "Have you seen the announcement?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Yes," Patel said, weary. "It's exactly what I feared. Someone leaked the data upward."
You mean he stole it?
Patel sighed. "He owns the system. Technically, anything created within company walls belongs to the corporation. But it wasn't his idea," she said. "He didn't even know how it worked." "I know," Patel said quietly, "but shouting won't fix it. Not yet." Maya slammed her laptop shut. David needs to know. That evening, she found him where he always was, wiping down the lobby windows. His reflection in the glass looked calm, too calm for what she was about to say. "They took it," she blurted out. "He's presenting your model to the board tomorrow, under his name." David didn't turn around. He kept polishing the glass until his hands stopped trembling. "I thought that might happen." "You knew?" "I've seen it before," he said softly. "People who steal ideas always think they're stealing power, but all they really take is weight they can't carry." She stepped closer. "You can't just let him get away with this." He looked at her reflection instead of her face. "If I fight him, it'll become about me. If I stay silent, it stays about the truth." "That's not fair," she whispered. "It's not," he agreed. "But fairness isn't always the proof of justice." Time. The next morning, the boardroom was filled with executives, investors, and press. Cameras clicked as the CEO walked to the front, smile polished, suit flawless. "Today," he began, "I'm proud to unveil Operation Clean Flow, a system I've personally developed with our internal teams. It's designed to revolutionize how we manage efficiency across the region." He clicked through slides, speaking confidently about sustainability, cost reduction, and innovative thinking. Every word came from the notes David had once scribbled by hand. Maya sat in the back, her jaw tight. Patel's warning echoed in her mind. Stay quiet for now, but she could feel something burning in her chest. The CEO ended his pitch to thunderous applause. The board members congratulated him. Investors nodded, impressed. It was a victory stolen in daylight. When the presentation ended, he caught Maya's eye from across the room. He smiled, almost knowingly, as if daring her to act. That afternoon, she rushed to the maintenance office, where David was fixing a broken vending machine. "They loved it," she said bitterly. "He's a hero now." He called it his innovation. David looked up with gentle eyes. "Good. Then maybe it'll do some good before it collapses." "What does that mean?" He handed her a screw. "It means if something's built on lies, it won't last long enough to matter." She wanted to argue, but his calm steadiness disarmed her. "You're not even angry?" He smiled faintly. "Anger's expensive. I can't afford it anymore." Over the next few weeks, Clean Flow rolled out company-wide. The CEO's name was everywhere. Magazine features, internal memos, congratulatory interviews, visionary leadership, they called it. But then the system began to falter. Minor at first. Shipment delays, mismatched reports, missing data. The algorithm started producing errors, small but persistent. Within a month, entire regions were reporting operational chaos. "What's happening?" the COO demanded in one meeting. "We spent millions on this rollout." The CEO blamed the staff. "They're not following procedure." But Maya knew better. The flaws were in the parts the CEO had removed. The corrections and redundancies David had kept only in his handwritten notes. The very pieces that made the model resilient. One evening, Maya found Patel pacing his office. "It's collapsing," he said. "Everything's breaking down." She nodded. "He left those parts out. Probably thought they were unnecessary." Patel sighed. "The board's furious. If they find out where this originated, things could turn fast." Maya hesitated. "Then maybe it's time they did." That night, she visited David again, this time with a different energy, not anger, but determination. You were right, she said. The truth's doing the sweeping now. He looked at her, surprised. It's failing? Spectacularly. They don't know why yet, but they will. David leaned back on his stool, eyes thoughtful. Then let it fail properly. Don't rush it. Let them see what happens when pride edits honesty. She smiled for the first time that week. You talk like this was your plan all along. He chuckled. No, I just stopped expecting clean results from dirty hands. Within another week, the fallout was undeniable. Reports leaked. Clients complained. Share prices dipped. The same executives who once cheered now whispered behind closed doors. The CEO scheduled an emergency board meeting, desperate to explain what had gone wrong. And that, Patel would later say, was when truth decided to stop whispering. For David, there was no celebration. He still arrived early, mopped the same floors, replaced the same filters. But now, when people passed him in the halls, they didn't laugh. They nodded quietly, respectfully, sometimes guiltily. He never said, "I told you so." He didn't have to, because sometimes dignity speaks louder in silence than arrogance ever could in words. Maya's desk had become a war room. Papers were spread across it, printouts, archived memos, timestamps, drafts. Every line of data told the same story, only no one had dared read it until now. The company's system, CleanFlow, was collapsing in slow motion. Departments were scrambling to fix things that shouldn't have broken. The CEO blamed implementation errors. The board blamed communication gaps. But the numbers told another truth. And that truth pointed back to one man, a janitor who had never asked for credit, only honesty. It started when Patel called Maya into his office. He looked exhausted, a stack of reports in front of him. "We've been tasked to audit CleanFlow internally," he said. "They think it's a logistics bug." She leaned forward. "It's not a bug, it's the missing logic, the part he removed." Patel rubbed his forehead. "Then we need to prove it. Not just say it, prove it." That night, Maya stayed in the office long after the cleaners had gone home. She dug through digital archives, file histories, edit logs, timestamps from the night they'd first entered David's handwritten data into her system. At 2:43 a.m., she found it. An early draft of the CleanFlow document saved automatically to the company cloud. Under document author, the metadata read, "Created by D. Reyes." Her heart skipped. She opened the version history. The notes were there. Hand-typed formulas she'd copied directly from David's notebook weeks ago. Some still bore her annotations. "Ask him about variable link here." It was undeniable. She printed everything, each page trembling slightly in her hands. But she didn't stop there. She went to Patel's office, unlocked the old merger archives, and pulled out the file from 5 years earlier. Reyes Logistics Solutions, Acquisition Summary. Inside, stapled to the final report, was a small internal memo from the former operations VP, a name long gone from the company. It read, "Acquisition complete. Reyes model absorbed into core system design. Recommend integrating founder's algorithmic efficiency metrics for long-term scale." The handwriting matched the loops and strokes in David's current notes. Same man, same mind, same system, reborn and restolen twice in one lifetime. When Patel arrived the next morning, Maya was waiting with the stack of evidence. He skimmed through the pages, his face hardening with each one. "So it's official," he said. "They didn't just steal his idea. They stole the very foundation of the thing that ruined him." She nodded. "And now it's falling apart under the same kind of greed." He leaned back, silent for a long while. "You realize what happens if we bring this up, right? They'll deny it. They'll deny us." She didn't flinch. "Then let them." That afternoon, they found David in the basement workshop, fixing a broken vacuum. Patel closed the door behind them and set the file on the counter. David looked from one face to the other, cautious. "You look like people carrying a storm." Maya smiled faintly. "We found proof." "Of what?" "That it's yours," she said. "All of it. The model, the metrics, even parts of the old acquisition files. You didn't just build a better system, you built the fendon they've been standing on for years." He didn't speak. His eyes moved over the papers slowly, as if reading ghosts. Then he exhaled, long and quiet. "I told you," he said finally. "The truth doesn't need a lawyer, it just needs time." Patel crossed his arms. "We can't sit on this anymore. The board's meeting in 3 days. Kerrigan will have to answer for what he's done." David shook his head. "If you go in angry, it'll look like vengeance. Let the facts speak. The board doesn't need a show, it needs contrast." "Contrast?" Maya asked. "Yes," he said. between what they think leadership looks like and what it actually is. The next 3 days were quiet but charged. Maya compiled every document into a single binder, neatly labeled, chronologically ordered. Patel prepared a concise presentation. No emotion, no accusation, just data and history. David came only once to review it. "Remove my name from the cover," he said. Patel frowned. "You've earned it." "Names make people defensive," he said. "Truth doesn't need a face." He walked out before they could argue. On the morning of the board presentation, tension hung in the building like static. Executives moved briskly, whispering rumors of major internal findings. The CEO arrived early, face drawn tight, phone glued to his hand. Maya stood outside the boardroom doors with the binder clutched to her chest. Her palms were sweating, but her voice was steady when she turned to Patel. "You sure we're ready?" He smiled faintly. "We're not. But the truth is..." Inside, the meeting began. The CEO started his usual speech, polished, corporate, rehearsed, charts, slides, talking points about temporary inefficiencies. Then Patel interrupted. "Before we proceed, the audit team would like to present some findings." The room went still. The CEO's smile stiffened. "Finding?" "Yes," Patel said. "Historical records concerning the origin and authorship of the clean flow model." Whispers rippled across the table. Maya stepped forward and placed the binder on the conference table. "These documents show a continuous development chain linking the current system to algorithms designed years ago by a former acquisition, specifically by Mr. David Reyes." The CEO laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You're basing that on paperwork from before the merger. That's ancient history." Patel didn't react. "The version logs from our internal servers confirm it." The first digital model was uploaded from his workstation. The handwriting and calculations match his archived notes. "We verified every timestamp." The CEO's face paled, but he tried to maintain composure. "Even if that were true, it's still company property." "No one's disputing that," Maya said softly. "He never asked for ownership. Only honesty." That sentence hung in the air like judgment. The room stayed silent. Some board members looked at one another, confused. Others looked ashamed. David wasn't there, but his presence filled the space through the weight of his restraint. Patel closed the binder and slid it toward the CEO. "You can address this now or wait until the auditors and press do it for you. Either way, the numbers won't stay quiet." The CEO's jaw tightened. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Outside the boardroom, Maya waited near the window, unable to breathe. After nearly an hour, the door opened. Patel stepped out first, eyes tired but calm. "Well?" she asked. "They've called for an emergency review. He's on the defensive." She exhaled. "And David?" Patel smiled. "He's where he's always been, downstairs, cleaning up after everyone else." That evening she found him there again, polishing the same stretch of floor. "They know now," she said. He nodded. "Good. Now they can choose what kind of clean they want, surface or deep." She watched him in silence for a moment. "You're not angry?" He looked at the reflection of light spreading across the floor. "No," he said softly. "Just relieved. The truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to stand long enough to stop being as." And in that moment, the weight that had clung to him for years seemed to lift, not because justice had arrived, but because he'd finally learned to stop chasing it. The fight was no longer his. The truth would handle itself now. The quarterly board presentation was supposed to be the company's redemption arc. Cameras, shareholders, and journalists packed into the auditorium. The giant screen behind the podium displayed the company's slogan in bold: "Innovation through leadership." The CEO adjusted his tie in the reflection of the screen, his expression composed but brittle. He'd rehearsed every word, every smile. The room smelled of expensive coffee and anxious pride. "Good morning," he began smoothly, stepping into the light. "Today I'm proud to share that our clean flow system has stabilized after months of recalibration. Efficiency is up 15%. Client satisfaction has improved. And this," he tapped the screen showing charts and graphs, "is only the beginning." Applause broke out on cue. Cameras clicked. But the numbers weren't his. Behind the scenes, Patel and Maya had spent nights fixing the damage the CEO's arrogance had caused. They'd restored the missing variables, the same redundant formulas David had once drawn on scrap paper. It was the janitor's model that had saved the company again, not the man now taking the credit. Halfway through the presentation, a board member raised a hand. "Daniel," she said evenly, "before we proceed, there's something that needs addressing." The CEO froze for half a second. then smiled politely. Of course. She glanced toward the side doors. We've invited a guest to clarify some concerns about authorship. The audience murmured. A few turned their heads toward the entrance. The side door opened quietly, and in stepped David Reyes. No suit, no briefcase, just his uniform, faded blue sleeves rolled, work badge clipped neatly to his chest. He paused at the doorway, the light behind him outlining a silhouette the company had long ignored. The CEO's smile faltered. What is this? The chairwoman folded her hands. Mr. Reyes has been mentioned in several internal reports related to Clean Flow's development. We thought it appropriate to hear from him directly. David walked to the front, steady but unhurried. The room seemed to shrink around his quietness. Cameras tilted, lenses zoomed. The CEO's practiced composure cracked under the weight of something he couldn't control, respect he hadn't earned. David stopped beside the podium and looked at the massive screen behind him. The charts glowed, clean, efficient, impressive, built on his ideas stolen twice in one lifetime. I don't belong at this table, he began softly, his voice steady, carrying more truth than volume. But it seems my work does. The murmur spread. The CEO tried to intervene. Mr. Reyes, this presentation is confidential. Confidential? David turned his gaze on him, calm but sharp. You shared my work with the world without my consent. I suppose confidentially depends on who's holding the microphone. The room went silent again. Maya stepped forward from the side row, carrying the same binder, the one filled with proofs, timestamps, and memos. Mr. Reyes isn't here to accuse anyone, she said clearly. He's here to confirm the facts. She handed the binder to the board chair. Pages rustled. Screens lit up as digital copies appeared on monitors. Metadata, version logs, signatures, all pointing to one truth. The CEO's voice turned brittle. This is absurd. You're telling me a janitor developed the same system my department spent months designing? No, Patel said from the back row. We're saying your department spent months removing the parts that made it work. A ripple of low voices filled the room. Reporters started scribbling. David remained still. He wasn't smiling, wasn't angry, just composed, like a man who'd finally stopped carrying someone else's sin. The CEO's tone hardened. Even if some of the ideas overlap, the execution. David interrupted quietly, the firmness in his voice slicing through the noise. You can steal execution too. It's just a cleaner word for theft. The board chair raised a hand. Let him speak. David took a breath and stepped toward the podium. I've been cleaning this building for 5 years. I've seen every corner, the walls that shine for visitors, the corners no one ever looks at. A company isn't so different. It's only as clean as the people who care for what others ignore. He paused, letting that land. When I built this system, I didn't build it for profit. I built it because waste of material, of talent, of trust, destroys good work from the inside out. You can't lead by pretending you invented order. You lead by respecting it. No one moved. Even the sound tech at the back stopped typing. The CEO's face had gone pale. You're twisting this in. David turned to him, voice calm. Real business isn't about titles. It's about trust. And trust doesn't come from standing above people. It comes from not stepping on them when you rise. That line hit like thunder wrapped in silence. The room stayed utterly still, the kind of stillness that happens when shame and respect collide. One by one, board members looked away from the CEO and toward the man in the janitor's uniform. The chairwoman closed the binder. The evidence is clear, she said quietly. Clean Flow originated from Mr. Reyes' designs. The omissions that caused system failure were authorized under your leadership, Daniel. The board will be conducting a full review. The CEO's jaw tightened. You can't be serious. She cut him off. This company has built itself on the labor of the unseen. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that's leadership. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Reporters exchanged glances, already sensing a story bigger than profit margins. David stepped back from the podium. I don't want compensation, he said. I don't need apologies. Just fix what's broken and remember who you're building on. He turned to leave, but the chairwoman stopped him. Mr. Reyes, she said, you've given us more than a model. You've given us a reminder of what integrity looks like. He nodded once, quietly, and walked toward the exit. The cameras followed him, but his steps never faltered. Behind him, the CEO slumped in his seat as board members whispered to one another. The press had already begun typing headlines. His empire of arrogance was collapsing in real time. In the hallway, Maya caught up to David. Her voice trembled. You did it. she said. He smiled faintly. No. The truth did. She wiped a tear and laughed softly. That line's going viral. He chuckled. Let it. Maybe someone will listen this time. They walked side by side down the long glass corridor. Behind them the noise of the boardroom grew louder. Arguments, questions, panic. Ahead of them was quiet. For the first time in years, David didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like a ghost wandering the ruins of his past. He felt light, not from winning, but from finally letting the truth breathe on its own. Outside, the midday sun reflected off the building's windows. He paused, looking at his own reflection. A man with worn hands, faded uniform, steady eyes. Not a founder, not a victim, just someone who had cleaned long enough to understand what real work meant. Ready to go? Maya asked. He nodded. Yeah, there's always more to clean. And as they stepped into the light, the world behind them began to shift. A company learning at last that the floor it once looked down on had been holding it up the whole time. The headlines hit the same morning the sun rose through spotless glass. Janitor exposes corporate fraud. Humility cleansed the boardroom. The man who redefined leadership. It spread faster than the company could respond. Journalists wanted interviews. Clients wanted statements. Investors wanted reassurance. But amid the noise, the one person everyone wanted to hear from, David Reyes, remained silent. He still arrived at dawn, still carried his mop, still polished the same stretch of marble he always had. The only difference was that now, people stopped to greet him. Executives nodded. Assistants smiled mirthlessly. Someone even left a bouquet on his cart with a note that read, "For the man who taught us what clean really means." He placed the flowers in a water jug and kept working. 3 days after the board meeting, the chairwoman called him upstairs. He hadn't been in the executive office since the day his company had been swallowed. Walking those halls again, he noticed how much had changed. New walls, new logos, same. When he entered the conference room, the board members stood to greet him. He hesitated. "No need for that," he said softly. The chairwoman smiled. "It's not for show, Mr. Reyes. It's for respect." She gestured toward a folder at the center of the table. "We owe you a debt that can't be measured in money, but we're going to try anyway. The board has unanimously approved a restitution package, full compensation for your original acquisition, adjusted for inflation and royalties from the clean flow system." David looked at the document but didn't touch it. "That's generous," he said. "But unnecessary." "Unnecessary," one of the members repeated, incredulous. "You've restored our credibility. You saved this company from collapse." He shook his head. "I just told the truth. You saved the company by listening." They exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We'd also like to offer you a permanent consulting position. Ethics and operational design. You'd have full authority to oversee training programs, culture development, and sustainability initiatives. Whatever you want, it's yours." David smiled, almost sadly.
"That's kind, but I already have a job."
"Mr. Reyes." He lifted a hand gently. "The floors still need cleaning. And I still have a shift in 20 minutes. They fell silent. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Then at least let us use your story. Let it teach others." He nodded. "That I can agree to." He stood, thanked them, and left the room the same way he had entered. Calm, grounded, and carrying no weight but his own. A week later the CEO resigned. No press conference, no public apology, just an email sent to all employees. Effective immediately. "I am stepping down as CEO. I take full responsibility for the recent misjudgments under my leadership. I hope this company continues to grow under better guidance." He cleared out his office that evening. When he passed the janitor's cart in the hallway, he paused. David was refilling a mop bucket. He didn't look up. The CEO, no longer one, just a man in a suit that suddenly looked too heavy, said quietly, "You could have destroyed me." David wrung out the mop, eyes on the floor. "You did that yourself." The man nodded, almost grateful for the honesty. "I don't expect forgiveness." David finally met his gaze. "Then don't. Just learn." The former CEO nodded again and walked away, shoulders lowered, steps unsteady, like someone realizing too late that power and wisdom were never the same thing. Weeks turned into months. The company changed from the inside out. They created a new department, Integrity and Systems. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have slogans or launch events. But slowly, the culture began to shift. Teams started holding open discussions about mistakes. Managers began sharing credit instead of hoarding it. Departments that once competed started collaborating. And at the center of it all, quietly, humbly, was David. He didn't take an office or a title, but employees began visiting him after hours, seeking advice. First one, then three, then whole teams. They came not for formulas but for perspective. How do we keep projects from falling apart? One asked. Start by listening, he said. Every breakdown begins with someone who stopped. How do you lead without control? Another asked. He smiled. By remembering that control isn't leadership. It's fear with better handwriting. Word spread. People started calling him Mr. Reyes, the mentor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The janitor teaching executives how to lead, but there was no irony in how they listened. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd already survived the world they were wired to face. During one of these quiet sessions, Maya sat across from him in the break room sipping tea. You could have taken everything, she said. The title, the money, the office. Why didn't you? He smiled. Because I already lost those things once. I learned that when you fight for your ego, you win temporary respect and permanent exhaustion. But when you fight for integrity, you don't have to fight again. She looked down, thoughtful. And what about you? Do you ever feel like you should have stayed in the boardroom? He shook his head. No, I belong where people see me. Not because of status, because of purpose. Out there I know who I am. Up there I'd start forgetting again. She nodded. You really mean it when you say you're at peace? He chuckled softly. Peace isn't a reward, it's maintenance. Like cleaning, you have to keep doing it every day, or the dust comes back. They laughed, and for a brief moment it didn't feel like mentor and student, just two people who had survived disillusionment and found clarity on the other side. When the company held its annual employee gathering months later, David was invited as the closing speaker. He resisted at first, but Maya convinced him. People need to hear the man behind the story, she said. So he agreed, under one condition. No spotlight, no stage, just a conversation. The event was held in the same hall where the humiliation had once begun. Rows of employees filled the seats, not out of obligation, but curiosity. David stood at the front, microphone in hand. He didn't read from notes. I've cleaned this place for years, he began, and I've learned that buildings, like people, collect dust, pride, fear, pretending. You can't see it until that starts changing the air. The audience listened, still and intent. When that happens, he continued, you don't blame the walls, you open the windows, you let truth in. That's what we did here. And I'm proud, not because we won something, but because we remembered who we are when we stop hiding. He paused, his voice softening. I want you to remember something. Success isn't the shine on the surface. It's how clean it stays when no one's watching. The hall fell silent. Then came the applause, not loud or theatrical, but steady and heartfelt. The kind of applause that said thank you for reminding us what matters. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, David stayed behind as usual. He rolled his mop bucket to the edge of the stage and began cleaning the same floor that had once witnessed his public humiliation. Maya appeared at the doorway. You really can't stop, can you? She teased. He smiled. It's not about stopping, it's about finishing what was started. She walked closer, looking out over the empty hall. You think they'll remember? He looked at the gleaming floor. If they forget, the dust will remind them. She laughed softly. You always have a line for everything. He shook his head. No, I just pay attention. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two people connected not by rank, but by truth. Outside, city lights shimmered through the tall windows. Somewhere in another building, another meeting was probably happening, another speech about leadership, profit, growth. But here in this quiet hall, the lesson had already been learned. Grace had won. Not the kind that demanded recognition. The kind that cleans without asking to be seen. When he finally left for the night, he paused at the exit, looking back one last time. The reflection on the floor was perfect. Not a trace of dust, not a mark of past disgrace. He thought of the CEO, of Patel, of Maya, of the countless others who had changed in small ways because of one simple thing. Honesty allowed to breathe. He turned off the lights and whispered to the darkness, almost like a prayer. Stay clean. Then he stepped outside into the cool night air, shoulders light, footsteps steady. For the first time in a long, long while, David Reyes wasn't walking away from something. He was walking toward peace. 6 months passed, the season turned, and the company looked different now, not from the outside but from the way people moved inside it. The laughter in the halls sounded freer, not nervous. Meetings ran shorter. Blame passed through fewer lips. And in every new hire orientation, there was a story told quietly but proudly. About the janitor, who reminded everyone that ethics isn't a department, it's a decision. On the first page of the new Employee Ethics and Innovation Manual, printed in bold, sat a quote that had no name beneath it. Real business isn't about titles, it's about trust. Nobody needed a signature to know where it came from. The sentence had become a compass. Managers quoted it in weekly meetings. Supervisors used it to end disputes. Even new employees barely unpacking their desks carried it in conversations, as if the words themselves had drubbed away years of cynicism. The company had evolved quietly, not by rebranding or campaigns, but by small human corrections. Instead of leadership seminars, they hosted integrity circles, open sessions where teams talked about mistakes without fear of punishment. The innovation budget wasn't reserved for executives anymore. It was distributed evenly across departments. Every employee could pitch an idea: custodians, receptionists, technicians, all of them. And at the head of the new inclusive design unit sat Maya. Her office wasn't on the top floor but near the operations wing, where she said the real work hums. Her desk was covered in sticky notes, sketches, and coffee stains. On the wall above it hung a single framed print of that same anonymous quote. Sometimes when reporters visited, she'd smile and point at it. "That's our mission statement," she'd say. "Everything we build starts from there." People often asked her what happened to David Reyes. She'd smile softly before answering. "He's still here, just not where you expect." Downstairs on the ground floor, David's cart still rolled through the corridors every morning. The same mop, the same quiet tune. But now, his shift began with nods and greetings, the kind that carry genuine warmth. "Morning, Mr. Reyes," one executive would say. "Morning," he'd reply, not missing a step. He never asked for special treatment. When someone tried to take his mop offering to help, he'd gently wave them off. "If I stop cleaning, I stop learning," he'd say. His badge still read facilities staff, though HR had offered to change it to ethics consultant twice. Each time he declined. "Titles get dirty too fast," he joked. But every now and then, when a new intern joined, they'd find themselves standing awkwardly beside him as he worked. Without ceremony, without warning, he'd start teaching. Not about business models or logistics, but about something far simpler. "See that scuff mark?" he'd say, pointing at a faint line on the floor. "Most people don't notice it until the light hits it. Problems in a company are the same. They look invisible until you start paying attention to how they reflect." The interns always left smiling, a little confused but strangely lighter, and when they'd mention it to Maya later, she'd grin. That's his version of a lecture. One morning the chairwoman herself came down to find him. She'd never visited the ground floor before. He was cleaning near the entrance when she stopped beside him. "I thought I'd thank you in person," she said. "Your words are printed in every manual now, every branch, every country." He didn't look up from the floor. "Then make sure they don't just read them, make sure they live them." She nodded. "We're trying." He wrung out the mop, water trickling into the bucket. "Trying is good, means there's still work to do." She smiled, realizing that was the closest thing to praise he ever gave. Before leaving, she asked, "Is there anything you'd like, Mr. Reyes? Anything at all?" He paused. "Yes, keep the lights on late on Fridays. The people who stay late are usually the ones who care most. Don't make them work in the dark." The chairwoman blinked, smiled again, and said, "Consider it done." Weeks later, the company held a small gathering to commemorate the first anniversary of Clean Flow's revival. The honest version, rebuilt correctly. It wasn't a corporate gala or a PR stunt, just a quiet afternoon in the cafeteria, coffee cups and paper plates, laughter echoing through glass walls. Maya gave a short speech. She spoke not about profits or growth, but gratitude. "We measure success differently now," she said. "Not by numbers alone, but by the kind of people we become while chasing them." And that shift started with one man who never needed applause to matter. She looked toward the back of the room, where David stood leaning on his mop handle, listening quietly. He shook his head when people clapped, mouthing, "Don't start that again." Afterward, as everyone left, Maya found him near the service elevator. "You never stay for the pictures," she teased. "I'm in all of them," he said, smiling. "You just have to look past the suits." That night, when the building emptied, he took his time. He walked every hallway, not out of duty but reflection. Each corridor held a memory. The laughter that once stung, the silence that once felt heavier than shame, the meeting rooms that had seen cruelty turn to accountability. He stopped at the boardroom door, the same one where he'd stood, mocked, years ago. Now the nameplate beside it read Integrity and Systems Meeting Hall. He smiled at that. Then slowly, he opened the door. Inside, the long table gleamed under soft light. No cameras, no applause, just the faint hum of the air conditioner. On the far wall, etched into a small brass plaque, were the same words that had outlived humiliation, theft, and ego. Real business isn't about titles. It's about trust. He reached out and brushed a bit of dust from the plaque, almost tenderly. When he turned to leave, his reflection followed him in the polished surface of the table, steady, peaceful, unbothered. Outside, dawn was breaking. The sky tinted the city in gold and blue, and the first wave of employees began arriving. They greeted him with smiles, some stopping to chat.
Morning, Mr. Reyes.
Morning. Big day today. Every day's big if you clean it right. He said it lightly, but they always walked away thoughtful. He moved to the entrance, his last stretch of the shift. The mop glided over the floor, catching the early light. From a distance it looked like he was painting with water, drawing invisible lines that only the sun could finish. When he was done, he leaned on the handle, breathing in the stillness. The building smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee. He thought of the years gone by, the betrayal, the laughter, the long climb from invisibility to peace, and he realized something simple. He hadn't changed the company by winning. He'd changed it by not becoming what it was. There was strength in not fighting back the way the world expected. There was power in restraint, grace in endurance, and freedom in choosing dignity over dominance. He smiled. Clean enough, he murmured. As he walked out the front doors, Maya watched from the mezzanine. She knew he'd never retire in the traditional sense. For him, the work was never about ending, only maintaining. And maybe that was the truest lesson of all. Nothing stays clean unless someone keeps caring. Closing narration, voiceover style. They called him a janitor. But what he really cleaned was a culture. He taught them that systems shine only when people do, that integrity doesn't need a corner office, just courage that doesn't bend when no one's watching. Real business isn't about titles. It's about trust, and the kind of success that lasts is the kind that stays clean even when no one's sweeping. If this story moved you, take a second before you scroll. Tell us where you're watching from, and share one word that describes how this story made you feel. Because somewhere out there, another quiet person is doing their work with dignity, and maybe your word is the one that helps them keep going.